Right.
Okay.
And now, as far as justice and all that, I got to tell you, first of all, I'm completely with you. The libertarian solution is, as long as America is not an empire and making this my business, then let people work it out on their own, just like you said, whether it's Canada or Zambia or anybody else. Just in the, waving the flag of justice sense, what I think personally would be the best solution is not for the Palestinians to insist on a second state, a separate state, because the Israelis, frankly, are never going to do it.
Okay.
I mean, they say, if only everybody just acted like Fatah, you'd have a separate state right now. Oh, really? Well, is that why they surrounded Yasser Arafat with tanks and kept him prisoner in his own headquarters until he finally died? Because they were so willing to work with Fatah? It's a lie. They're not willing, come hell or high water, to allow there to be a separate Palestinian state. So what I would suggest...
Why not? Wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? Why not?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons. First of all, the religious right in Israel believes that the Bible says that all that land belongs to them, and anybody who stands in their way ought to be dead.
Well, that Bible's really a confusing document.
There's also military purposes, such as the West Bank Hill is, topographically, that's actually where I believe the '67 war was launched from or whatever. Now, I personally have talked with Daniel Levy, who's a former cabinet minister and peace negotiator over there in Israel, and he says that the military strategy of, we have to have the high ground of the West Bank is just silly, that all the bazillions of dollars of American munitions make advantages like a hilltop completely moot in a situation like this, which I tend to think is correct.
Right. Hills aren't as valuable as they used to be.
Government see it that way.
Yeah, hills aren't as valuable as they used to be strategically in a military sense.
Right.
I can totally see that. So now, do you have some kind of revolutionary solution here that's never going to get implemented because you're a libertarian and nobody listens to you?
I don't know how revolutionary it is, but what I think that the Palestinians should do is they should insist on becoming Israeli citizens. They should insist that the West Bank and Gaza are part of Israel, that they are Israeli citizens, and they want the full rights of Israeli citizens. And that way they can call out to the whole world the absolute intolerable apartheid situation that exists in that country.
Now,
because there's another thing that the Israelis will never let happen come hell or high water, give these people citizenship and respect their rights as Israeli citizens. But one of them makes them much more obvious hypocrites, wouldn't you say?
I think that it makes sense. I mean, I think either way that both of those sound like they should be able to run their own countries if they want to run their own countries, and they should be able to go into, every other country should let them in, but the only one that I can really say anything about is the United States. I think that we would benefit greatly from, I've met some Palestinians over here that work very hard, and I'd love to have them over here working very hard.
Of course, yeah.
So, I mean, that's first off where we're making our biggest mistake. I don't know how easy it is for them to get out of these areas. I mean, they look like the West Bank and Gaza Strip look like very large areas. They must have some kind of airport, right?
No, they're prisons. They are under blockade. They cannot get in or out. They cannot trade in or out. They live in a giant concentration camp.
Really?
I've seen news reports where the farmers sometimes will just to go work at their job. It's across this fence, and they have to go through a checkpoint. And sometimes the guards just don't bother coming back to the gate to let them back through so that they can go home for the night, and they end up sleeping in a field.
Yeah, well, that's probably, a bedtime story compared to the way things are in Gaza now. But, yeah, you're right. It's purely criminal. And, by the way, something that you mentioned at the beginning about, well, how would I react if somebody in the next town over was shooting a bunch of rockets into my town and that kind of thing? And I think probably everyone has heard people... I don't know, I guess the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee wrote this talking point and sent it out en masse because it's just everywhere. People say, oh, well, what if people in Mexico were shooting missiles across the border into California?
Yeah.
And in fact, I read one quote of a reporter who said that he was told that exact thing by 3 or 4 different people in 3 or 4 widely removed job descriptions in one day, and was just floored by how effective the Israelis are getting these talking points out. But, Justin Raimondo, our head writer at Antiwar.com, said, well, let's actually, as long as we're using the Mexico analogy, let's get this right. What if the Mexican army invaded Southern California, herded all the people of San Diego and Los Angeles into Death Valley, built a giant fence around them, bombed them whenever they felt like it. Then, what would the Americans do? Would we not shoot rockets into our former towns? Now you see the real analogy, America and Mexico and rockets. This is what we're talking about. Mexico conquering us, forcing us onto worthless land, and then treating us like animals in a cage. Would we or would we not shoot back? And then would we or would we not be confused as to who was the aggressor and who was defending themselves?
It's powerful stuff. Now, let's talk about the bads and wrongs of the Palestinians. Where are they? Are they, are they rife? Are they these terrorists that we've heard about? What are they doing?
Well, I don't know how long it's been since there was a Hamas-sponsored suicide bombing, but probably not too long. I mean, Hamas, I don't know everything about, their leadership and all their names and those kinds of things, but they were created by Israel and the United States, with the cooperation of the United States, to be a conservative religious alternative to the secular communist PLO. Well, now we sing our blowback song and realize, like, ooh, maybe that wasn't the best idea. But, as far as I can tell, Hamas is run by a bunch of, politicians, would-be rulers of a state, which by definition makes them murderers and horrible people. And the proof's in the pudding. I mean, they'll send a 15-year-old to go blow up a pizza parlor full of 15-year-olds. I mean, that's terrorism. There's nothing else you can call it.
Yeah.
The question is not, I guess Hamas aren't nice guys, so what do we do now or whatever? The question is, why would anybody in Gaza support them? The question is, why would anyone allow their 15-year-old boy to go and become a suicide bomber? They sound desperate. It's because they're under occupation.
Now,
it's because they're absolutely driven to desperation. I mean, think how bad your life would have to be, because we're talking about human beings here, you know what I mean? The language barrier is just a language barrier. These are people who look just like your next-door neighbor here. What would it take for you to strap on a bomb and be willing to end your life just as long as you could take a few of them with you?
It would take removing...
That's not the kind of circumstance that is created in someone's mind strictly by, religious brainwashing and the promise of 72 virgins in heaven. This is about real human political grievances on earth. Occupation, degradation, and humiliation.
And it takes removing it takes removing all the other forms of redress. I mean, you talked earlier in the call about how they've gone through the process and Hamas was elected, and then they discounted them. So every avenue that they try to address the situation just gets knocked out. And when you take away all of people's options, what else do they have left?
Yep, that's just about exactly it. And in fact, as long as we're on the subject, I'll go ahead and I got to mention the name of the book. It's Dying to Win by Robert A. Pape, P-A-P-E. Dying to Win: The Strategic Logic of Suicide Terrorism. And he tracked every single suicide terrorist on Earth from 1980 through, I guess, last year, because he's kept it updated. He's kept the database updated. Virtually all of them, with the exceptions are few enough that they only prove the rule. Suicide terrorism is a direct result of occupation by a foreign country's military, period. And the great example is Sri Lanka, where neither side is Muslim. It's secular, Marxist, I think nominal Hindus versus Buddhists. And I forget. Maybe it's the nominally secular communists, nominally Buddhists versus the Hindus. One way or the other, none of them believe in Muhammad, and it's the leading area of suicide bombing on earth is in Sri Lanka. Then you take a country like Sudan, where everybody is a Sunni Muslim, and in fact quite radical Sunni Muslims in many places. And there are deaths on the order of hundreds of thousands of people dying. And no suicide bombing, none, zilch, zero, nada. Why? Because they're not under occupation by a foreign power. They're being killed, but they're not dying with their last thought in their head, the fear that their children are going to be converted to some other religion, that they're going to have their language taken from them, that they're going to have their entire society changed. Those are the things that lead people to such desperation that they are willing to countenance voluntary. I mean, let's face it, there's no conscription in suicide terrorism. These are all walk-in volunteers.
Yep.
And it takes community support to even allow there to be an office for people to go and volunteer at. It takes widespread support in a community, and only foreign occupation can create such circumstances, and Robert A. Pape proved it with math.